Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! My neighborhood does not have a homeowners association. At least, not anymore. When my parents first moved in, my older sibling was maybe 2 years old, and with me, as a little glowworm, there was an HOA. They took money from the neighborhood in exchange for their services. At first, and for quite a while, my parents just kind of shrugged it off. The HOA shoveled the snow off the streets in winter and dealt with trash collection, so they were doing something worthwhile, right? No. The city controlled the snowplows and garbage trucks, not the HOA. But still, there was the illusion of effort. And besides, one summer they decided to contact a company to plant new trees all over the neighborhood. The fact that the new company was owned by the son of the head of the HOA was totally coincidental. The trees were the beginning of the end for the HOA. Why? Well, my grandma on my dad's side was visiting when they came around to plant the trees. My grandma, who is a certified master gardener, and so she stared through the windows of our house as the guys planting the trees just dropped the saplings on the grass. Still, with the roots inside the bag they came in, no holes dug, no holes cut, just a bagged sapling lying on the grass like a pathetic and sad stick. The saplings lay there all night. No one came back to actually do their job and plant them. My master gardener grandma mentioned offhand that those saplings were going to die unless they got in the soil. And something clicked in my mom's head. She was paying the HOA money, actual money, every month, while both she and my dad worked, taking care of two very little kids, sending us to daycare and preschool, and arranging babysitters and feeding us. And the homeowners association was just going to pull this crap instead of do what she's paying them for? No way. So she showed up to the head of the HOA's house and basically demanded that the trees get planted properly, like she's apparently paying for them too. The head of the HOA, so excited for someone actually caring about the neighborhood, made their second mistake. They asked if Mom wanted to join the HOA. She agreed. The trees were planted, but most didn't make it. My grandma was right. First thing first, my mom showed up to the next HOA meeting. There were like 5 people there. No wonder they asked Mom to join. They desperately needed the people. So Mom looked at this collection of white people, herself included, who weren't even paying money to the HOA like the rest of the neighborhood. All the contractors the HOA called in were close relatives of other HOA members and weren't paid by the HOA. After all, they are family. So my mom started digging. She spent pretty much a full summer taking down the HOA before she had to go back to teaching in the fall. With me carted along after her and my sibling old enough to be in school or daycare, she dug through the years of paperwork detailing the HOA's financial situation. And she found something extremely enlightening. The HOA didn't actually do anything. Well, they didn't do anything to benefit the community. Everything they claimed to do was either covered by the individual homeowner or by the city itself. So they were collecting money from all the neighborhood residents under false pretenses. And actually, they weren't even supposed to be in our neighborhood. Their association zone was a whole different neighborhood. So what is a working mother of 2 small children to do while her husband is off at work and she's off for the summer? She goes door to door with pamphlets. Me and my sibling in a stroller weaving her way through the neighborhood blocks, pamphlets explaining the situation and how to stop paying for services you'll never get. Pamphlets that are, of course, written in both English and Spanish to account for the high amount of Latino and Hispanic people in our neighborhood. And naturally, she got a lawyer and an accountant. It put a major dent in her pocket, but if it meant the entire neighborhood wasn't exploited for money each month, it was worth every penny. Another HOA member helped her sift through the documents and data and pass out pamphlets and encourage people to show up to the meetings, but had to back out because of work-related reasons. My mom rolled up to the courthouse flanked by the lawyer and accountant. Her kids safe at home with her husband and had more than enough evidence to give the homeowners association the heck out of her neighborhood, expose the fraudsters for the frauds they were, and make sure that no HOA would ever push their luck in our neighborhood again. It's been almost 19 years and no one's even tried making another homeowners association in our neighborhood. This happened during my summer job at the city zoo, where I mostly helped out in the gift shop and occasionally was guest services. The zoo was usually a peaceful place, a haven for both animals and animal lovers. That was until the day Karen decided to pay us a visit. It was a very hot day and the zoo was buzzing with families and excited kids. I was stationed near the primitive exhibit, making sure guests followed the rules. No feeding the animals, no tapping on a glass, the usual stuff. And that's when I spotted her. The woman who soon turned this ordinary day into utter chaos. Karen, as we will call her, was hard to miss. Clad in designer clothes and oversized sunglasses, she walked through the zoo like she owned the place. Her unfortunate husband and two kids trailing behind. They stopped at the primates exhibit, and that's when the trouble started. One of our oldest and most beloved gorillas, Max, was lounging near the glass. Karen's kids seemed fascinated, but Karen herself was less impressed. She started complaining loudly about how lazy and boring the animals were. I tried to explain that it was nap time for many of the animals due to the heat, but Karen wasn't having any of it. Then the unthinkable happened. Karen reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a bag of peanuts, tossing them at Max. I immediately stepped in. "Ma'am, please don't feed the animals. It's dangerous for their health." Karen snapped back. "Don't tell me what to do. We paid to get in here. We will do what we want." Despite my protests, Karen kept throwing peanuts, which was when Max finally lost his patience. He let out a loud roar and charged at the glass. The kids screamed and Karen's husband finally stepped in, trying to pull her away. But Karen was on a roll. She turned her fury on me. "This is your fault. You're upsetting the animals." Before I knew it, she had thrown her iced coffee at me, drenching my uniform. I was stunned, coffee dripping down my face when the manager arrived. He had heard the commotion and came to see what was going on. My manager tried to calm Karen down, but she was beyond reason, accusing us of mistreating the animals and threatening to sue. And that's when Karen made her biggest mistake. In a fit of rage, she tried to shove past my manager to supposedly free the animals. My manager caught her arm to stop her, and that's when she slapped him across the face. That slap was the last straw. My manager radioed security and within minutes, the zoo security escorted the kicking and screaming Karen away, much to the relief of everyone around, especially her embarrassed family. The aftermath was that Karen was arrested for assaulting a zoo employee, and we later found out that she was banned from several other establishments for similar behavior. I, 16 male, lost my dad when I was 5. My paternal side of the family never stopped being there for me and I bonded a lot with my grandma right after. She started teaching me how to cook whenever I would go to my grandparents to visit. Grandma always believed it was important for kids to start learning pretty young and to know the basics early. But she also told me that it was important for boys to learn because so many people think it's a woman thing, and then you have grown men who can't make a single thing for themselves. Grandma has this cookbook that her grandma started. Her grandma taught all her kids from it, and then her mom did the same for her and her siblings until grandma got it and did the same with my dad and his siblings. She has taught some of her grandkids pieces from it, but she and I have cooked through the whole book in the last decade, and it's been great. After my dad died, mom got married to her boyfriend, and my parents were separated before he died. And they have 2 daughters together, aka my half-sisters. My half-sisters are 9 and 8 years old, and my mom has shown them Facebook posts my grandma made about the 2 of us cooking from her cookbook. She doesn't post often and she and my mom aren't friends, so I'm not sure why mom even saw. But she was showing the girls for a while and they got jealous and wanted to take part, but they don't know my grandma and aren't included in my time there, thankfully. So a couple of months ago, mom decided they should have their own. They wanted me involved and to share the recipes I make with grandma in their book, and I refused. My mom told me I should be willing to share recipes that mean something to me with my only siblings. She told me they might not be dad's kids, but they are my family regardless and they want to take part in this with me. I told mom that should be for her and them and to leave me out of it. The girls hate that I won't share and take part, and they pester me non-stop now. Every time they get a little more upset, my mom gets mad and tells me that I am being a jerk, and I should be embracing the connection between my dad's family and my current family. She told me it makes them feel bad, that I don't want them to share in something I enjoy so much. Am I the jerk? And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, "You're not the jerk. You're allowed something special between you and your grandma. Your mom needs to learn and to teach your siblings in an age-appropriate way, but having connections outside of the family unit isn't a snub, but it's something precious, worth cherishing. Perhaps as a compromise you could come up with a dish together as a family completely separate from your grandma's recipes. Or if cooking isn't something you want to share with your siblings at all, another family activity or hobby perhaps. I don't know what your relationship with your stepdad and half-siblings is like. There is a difference between holding a personal boundary and being a jerk. It doesn't sound to me like you've crossed that line here, but maybe finding some kind of compromise will help them to feel valued by their older brother while still allowing you to keep this personal thing between you and your grandma." Another commenter adds, "Not the jerk. It's okay and healthy to have something that's just for you and your paternal family. That said, if you enjoy cooking and baking, how about you start a new tradition with your sisters? Find something that isn't what you make with your grandma and something they like. Even if it's generic like cupcakes, you can do a lot with cupcakes, from flavors, fillings, and decorating. Make TikToks out of your cooking sessions. I am sure you don't do that with your grandma, and little girls love that. If it's okay with their mom, of course. Might be best if you keep your stepmom out of the initial planning sessions. She's the one pushing the whole family thing. Ask the girls what they would like to make, and then go to your stepmom and tell her you're doing it. If she says no, it has to be one of your grandma's recipes, you know she's being delusional and hurting her girls who are probably going to be excited to make anything with their brother." I had always been fond of animals, and my most prized companion was a fluffy orange tabby cat named Whiskers. Whiskers wasn't just a pet. He was my best friend, my confidant, and the little furry creature who brought joy into my life. One bright Saturday morning, I had to leave Whiskers alone at home as I had some errands to run. Little did I know my neighbor, whom everyone called Karen, had been watching my cat with envious eyes. She had a son, Timmy, who had taken quite a liking to Whiskers and had often expressed his desire to have him as his own. As I was out, Karen concocted a devious plan. She decided to take Whiskers for her son, thinking that I wouldn't notice or care. So, with a sense of entitlement, she sneaked into my backyard, coaxed Whiskers with some treats, and whisked him away to her house. When I returned home, I immediately noticed that Whiskers was missing. Panicked, I searched everywhere, calling his name, but there was no sign of him. That's when I noticed that my back gate, which I always kept locked, was slightly ajar. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized that Whiskers didn't just wander off. He was taken. Determined to find my furry friend, I knocked on my neighbors' doors, asking if they had seen anything suspicious. Most hadn't, but then I came to Karen's house. When I asked her if she'd seen Whiskers, her response was a little too quick and a bit too nervous. No, I haven't seen your cat. Maybe he ran away. You know how cats are," she said, avoiding eye contact. Her behavior struck me as odd, so I decided to hang around her house, hoping to spot Whiskers. And sure enough, after a while, I heard the familiar meow coming from her backyard. I peeked over the fence and there he was, Whiskers, looking confused and scared. I confronted Karen, demanding she return my cat immediately. She denied everything at first, but when I threatened to call the police, she broke down. "Please don't call the police. My son wanted back cat so badly, and I just wanted to make him happy," she pleaded. However, stealing is stealing, and I was not about to let this slide. I called the police, and when they arrived, Karen's story unraveled quickly. She confessed to taking Whiskers, thinking it wouldn't be a big deal, but the police didn't see it that way. They arrested her for trespassing and theft. Karen's son, Timmy, was in tears not just because he was losing the cat he'd grown to love in the short time Whiskers was with him, but also because his mother was being taken away by the police. I felt bad for the kid. It wasn't his fault that his mother had acted so recklessly. I reassured him that Whiskers was well loved and well cared for in my home, and that he could come visit anytime he wanted. The whole neighborhood was buzzing about the incident. Some couldn't believe Karen would do such a thing, while others weren't surprised, given her entitled behavior in the past. As for me, I was just relieved to have Whiskers back home, safe and sound. In the days that followed, Karen faced legal consequences for her actions. She was charged with petty theft and trespassing. Her reputation in the neighborhood took a hit, and she became somewhat of a pariah. As for Whiskers, he seemed to understand that he had been through quite an ordeal. He clung to me more than usual in the days following the incident, as if afraid I would leave him, or he would be taken again. I know the title sounds like I'm 65-year-old man who's constantly running to the front door yelling at the kids on the other side of the street to not play on my lawn, but hear me out. We have been living in a mid/upper class street of my town for around 10 years now, due to regulations that our real estate agent did not mention when selling it to my mom and dad. Our foundations were set lower than the ones of our neighbors, which was not much of a problem until the neighbor right in front of us. We have a small sideway in the street when our and other houses are located, so our houses are just 4 meters apart from each other. Started to grow bushes to seal off his garden from the outside world. But we noticed them getting bigger. We did what every person would do and jokingly reminded them to please keep the bushes in check, so they didn't grow too big. They ignored it for as long as they lived there, which freaked my mother out. She is mentally ill, which ultimately led to her not being able to really work anything but a 450 euros job anymore, despite her only being in her late 40s. Me and my brother weren't able to clean our front yard as often as it needs to be cleaned due to school and university being very stressful. We would have to clean it on a daily basis even in summer because their bushes were shedding leaves left and right. Another thing that was annoying was that our rain drains for our front porch and garage were stuffed up with the leaves and would regularly overflow. My neighbors moved out about 1 year ago and a new couple moved in, who we first thought were nice. Turns out they were even worse than the other neighbors and even mouthier. They made it very clear that the sealed-off garden and their house having a higher foundation than ours, and the rest of the neighbors' properties were the main reasons they bought it, and they won't change anything about it. My mom was getting so freaked out about all of that. Keep in mind that she's ill, that she was close to selling the house. The neighbor kept being annoying as hell and even throwing parties in the garden, which oftentimes were way too loud and kept all the neighbors awake, resulting in us or one of our neighbors having to call the police. So one day my mother looked out the front door and snapped after seeing how many leaves and other crap from the neighbors' bushes were laying in our front yard. She ran out into the garage, grabbed a lawn bag, put a bunch of the stuff that was laying in our front yard into it, and threw them in front of my neighbor's door. That's illegal in Germany. A few hours later, my neighbor came to us, being petty and all smug, saying he would sue us and that he would have to pay loads and loads of money for ruining his front yard with our garbage. Afterwards, he took photos of our house and even zoomed into our windows, illegal as well, which I was lucky to see through my window and recorded him doing it. I then proceeded to look into the city regulations and soon found out that we couldn't really do anything about their leaves falling on our front yard. But there is an extra clause in the regulations, which states that this only applies for as long as the other party's living conditions are not compromised. When our neighbor then went through with his lawsuit, I was completely prepared to ruin his day. The judge wanted to make it a quick case, but our lawyer showed her all the evidence that clearly showed him that his leaves were 1. Compromising our living quality by blocking our drains with his garbage. He was breaking privacy laws by filming our house without consent. Further, my mom has a disabled ID due to her illness, which combined with us telling the judge for how long we had to endure all of this, led to the charges against us to be dropped and him having to pay a fee for breaking privacy laws and him having to do something against his bushes. My neighbor was then given 2 options on how he could proceed. 1, he somehow manages to stop the leaves from falling on our property, or he has to tear everything down and has to build another form of protection which would not compromise our living quality. He had 1 month to find a solution but ended up not finding one, which led to him having to tear down the whole thing. My mom was happier than I had ever seen her in the past 10 years and sat through the whole thing. The only thing that was missing to make all of this perfect was her having popcorn.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.